Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Sunday Conversations. My name is David Defoe, the Relationship Ministries Director of the Allegheny East Conference, and I am so excited today to be welcoming Dr. Emil and Sister Brenda Peeler. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about them in way of introduction, and I'm going to turn it over to them. But Dr. Pilla was born and reared in Sacramento, California. And for over 35 years, Dr. Pilla has served in various positions of leadership in the church and the broader community, most notably as a pastor, conference evangelist, author, associate ministerial director, college professor, and executive director of the West Side Brighter Vision Foundation. He was also formerly a director of church growth and evangelism for Southeastern California Conference. Now, since July 2016, he served as the senior pastor or the bishop of the Capitol Hill Seventh-day Adventist Church there in the nation's capital. And he's engaged as an international evangelist and as an adjunct professor at Washington Adventist University in Tacoma Park, Maryland. His motto for ministry and life is, when you build people, you build the kingdom. All right, let me just talk about the star of the show now that we've got Dr. Peeler out of the way. Brenda Peeler is a native of Los Angeles, California. She has a master's of business administration degree with an emphasis in strategic management and an extensive work history within the nonprofit, private, and public arenas. Her hobbies include reading, walking, cooking, and sports, but her greatest passion is in serving others. Listen, God has called her to minister the ministry of intercessory prayer, and she counts it as a privilege to be a prayer warrior on behalf of God's people. Her life mission is to be filled with the Holy Spirit on a daily basis in order to be the answer to those God places in her path. Her favorite scripture, Jeremiah 29 and verse 11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." Together, they're the proud parents of 3 adult daughters, LaDonna, Nicole, and Alicia, and 1 grandson, Jeremiah Emil. Listen, I want to welcome to the broadcast Dr. Emil and Brenda Peeler. Why don't you all just greet us and let people know some things about you that maybe weren't in the introduction?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having us. It's a privilege just to be here with you today. I guess if I wanted to share a little something that wasn't in my introduction, I am a lover of animals, specifically dogs. I can be found watching dog videos. I can be found watching dog movies when I want to just relax. So even though I love dogs, here's the thing. I actually don't have one yet, but I know when the time is right, I will have one.
Well, hopefully that dream does not come to pass too soon. But the bottom line is something about me. Well, when I was a teenager, I was a political intern for Governor Jerry Brown, who served 2 8-year terms as California's governor. And so he was the youngest governor, and he was also the oldest governor many years later. But while he was the youngest governor, I served as the first Black political intern in his cabinet or in his office. And that was what I wanted to do. That's what I felt called to do, just to go into law and to serve people early. Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, listen, we're gonna break for a commercial really quick, and then we'll come right back and we'll start our interview. And by all means, if you're joining us online, if you have any questions for Dr. Peeler and Sister Peeler, just put them right into the comment box as you come on. Just share it with someone who may also need to see it. We'll be right back.
The Relationship Ministries Department of the Allegheny East Conference is a family of ministries that seeks to engage, enrich, and empower families, men, singles, couples, and parents to have healthy and whole relationships. To access the many resources we have available to you, your church, or your family, visit us on the web at www.visitaec.org/relationshipmin.
Second nature.
All right, real quick, we're going to start with this. Listen, tell the people online how you all got together. Share with us your love story, how you met, and then Sister Pilla, how many times you had to tell him no? I think Doc, I think you're muted.
All right. Oh, I think. Go ahead. Can you hear?
Yep.
All right.
So we actually met at Loma Linda University on the La Sierra campus. So we met in college. We were actually both dating other people when we initially met. So, that was kind of a good thing, because when we met one another, we didn't have the typical hindrances. We could just be ourselves. And so we just kind of started off as friends.
Yeah. And, she really wanted me because I was so handsome. And the bottom line is, the Lord prevailed because of the fact that I was just one of the big men on campus. And so she prayed. She's a prayer warrior, and it just happened. No, actually, what happened is we did meet at Loma Linda University, and we were just friends. Mm-hmm. And it was a great meeting. And I was working security, and she was working desk. And I had broken up with my girlfriend, and she was still with her boyfriend. And so, but, I just wanted to see, how far I could get. So we talked, and she was at the night resident assistant, and she was working desk. And so I just, I said, you need to let me take you out. You need to let me take you out. And she said, no. I said, why? Why? And she said, well, I have a boyfriend. I said, well, where is he? She said, well, he's in Los Angeles. And I said, he's not a good guy. She said, no, he's a nice guy. I said, no, he's not a nice. I said, I'm asking you for a little meal, your little dinner. And she says, no, I have a boyfriend. I said, he's a mean guy. You know why? I said, and he doesn't even want you to eat. I'm just trying to feed you. And, but.
He was quite persistent. He was very persistent.
But it was real cool. It was real cool. And so finally, she basically, her and her boyfriend broke up, and then we began just to date, talk, and that kind of thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So sort of this idea of friendship being the basis of your relationship, like, how do you think, how important do you all think that was?
I really think that because we didn't start off as, this intimate type of connection, it was more of a friendship. I think it was more organic and authentic. And like I said, we were really able to just be ourselves. So we knew, one another. And I think that really has been a great foundation for our relationship, because we started as friends. That's how it started.
Absolutely. And I would definitely agree. And it built a bond that I think lasts to this day. And so I really believe that couples, if you take it a little slower, if you, especially beginning your relationship, I really believe that helps to build a foundation without all of the pressure of trying to be something that perhaps you're not ready for. So friendship, we would recommend that.
Gotcha. All right. So sort of talk to the audience about some of the biggest blessings that you've seen in your marriage, or tell us at a time in your marriage that you don't feel like you would have made it through without each other. Like, talk to us about that.
When I think about some of the biggest blessings, one of the biggest blessings, and I think my husband would agree, is the fact that we did get married very young. We were really young. I was 20 years old. I was a kid. I wasn't even a legal adult, but it worked for us. Biggest blessing is the fact that everything that we have it together. We saw each other and we grew together. And I think that really has been something that has strengthened our marriage. So every major accomplishment, we've achieved it together, whether if it was, educational accomplishments, professional accomplishments, raising our kids. We grew together and we did it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was 22 years old, and we did not have much, but we did have each other, and we had a basis of our friendship. And some of the blessings, is I would definitely say our children, and some of the just the progress that we have made in terms of building each other, moving from basically kids to adulthood. We really did grow together. And so would I absolutely say that was the best way for anybody to do it? Perhaps not, because of the fact that, it was a growing, we had love, we had each other, we had a good model for parents, but the bottom line is that's quite young to begin your journey. But God, it worked for us, and God has blessed over the years, and we've seen a lot of blessings, and indeed we have grown up together.
So sort of give me an idea, like what are some of the things about your relationship that you feel make your relationship unique, like set apart?
Unique. I don't know if I would really say necessarily unique. I think what makes our relationship what it is the fact that we don't pattern ourselves after other people's relationships, right? We understand what works for us, and we understand our roles, and we operate in our roles, and we're comfortable in that space. And so I think, for us, that works.
Yeah. I would agree, Brenda, but I believe part of the uniqueness, if we're going to use that term, is that we really like each other. Not only do we love each other, but we really like each other. We have the same musical taste. I mean, she knows what I like in music. I mean, from day one, musical taste. Food, she's a foodie, and we love just doing that. That's a unique thing. We don't ever fight about food or music or even sports or anything like that. But one thing I think is unique with me being a pastor for over 35 years. One of the unique qualities of our relationship is that not only does she affirm me as her man, as her lover, as her friend, but she also affirms me as her pastor. She does not. It's amazing when she has some questions about the Bible. She really defers. When she comes to worship, she comes with her notebook expecting something. She gives me the space to study. There's never been a time where I had to to fight to try to do my calling. But she is probably, and I've said this to my my congregation, all of my congregation, she's probably my greatest and most supportive member also. And I want you to know that I have pastored some great churches, and I have some great members, and Capitol Hill is top of the line. But the bottom line, it's very unique. Sometimes, that whole dynamic between, okay, husband, father, and pastor, she has chosen me and allowed me to be her pastor. And I think that's very, very unique.
Can I just say one other thing about that too? I never planned to marry someone in ministry. I wasn't opposed to it, but it just wasn't on the radar. And so he's exactly right. You know, when I come to worship, I expect him to come and to deliver as my pastor. So when I'm sitting there, yes, he's my husband, of course, but he's my pastor, and I'm looking to him for pastoral leadership when we go each week and throughout the week. So just wanted to share that.
Man, maybe when I get to like year 30 or something, my wife will bring a notebook when I'm preaching. But maybe I ain't saying nothing, man. Well, listen, that's great, and I want to thank you all for that. Talk to us then, and you mentioned a little bit of it, Doc. Talk to us about how you handle conflict, how you handle your work-life balance, stuff like that. And are there some examples that you all may be willing to share with those who are watching?
It's always in a work in progress, especially when we're younger parents. Of course, being young, we had our children early, very young. And so that work-life balance, she accepted my role as pastor, but she was more of the caretaker and making sure that the kids were okay. And she did not, outside of music, she did not really exercise her gifts in the church. But her job was basically, or her assignment, her responsibility, and she did it willingly, was to make sure the kids were okay and that they were fortified. But one of the things in terms of conflict, we've kind of developed a four keys to make sure that we reduce the risk of getting divorced. Because one of the reasons why people get divorces is because they don't know how to handle successfully conflicts. Now, we did not start out this way, but I definitely want you to know that we have grown over the years in terms of how to handle conflict. And why don't you just share the first way that we are? Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the things that we've just really tried to do, because we know that conflict is going to happen, right? It's inevitable. Yeah. But one of the things that we try to minimize is this thing called escalation. In other words, allowing ourselves to just kind of spin out of control when we have a conflict. So, you know, saying things that you're going to regret saying, you know, just allowing those emotions to just get to a place where you can't pull them back.
And also the volume.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
he doesn't like screaming.
No,
he doesn't like screaming and hollering. You know, I did a lot of that when the kids were little, but you know, he doesn't like, that's not a comfortable space for him, right? And so we try not to do a lot of screaming and hollering and all of that.
And so we call that escalation, you know, kind of minimize that escalation. And not to say we've never done it, but the bottom line, but we try to minimize it. And so that minimize that risk factor. The second one, I think that can be helpful is that the whole thing about invalidation. And that's those, try to minimize not only the volume and the heat that takes place. We don't want to invalidate each other's humanness, because she's created in the image of God. I'm creating the image of God. We're not animals. And so we try to minimize those belittling comments that minimize each other's feelings and their value. You know, all those sarcastic digs. We found them to be very dishonoring and pretty much degrading. So we try to, you know, kind of minimize that, because that's a risk factor. Because if you're always try to give some, you know, let me just give you just a quick example. I remember, I don't know if you remember, Brenda, when I was a young, and we were part of a tent meeting, and we stayed at this lady's house, and it was very, you know, intense meeting, and we had daily meetings, and I know Dr. Foe, you've been a part of those, and so it was our first meeting together, actually, and she had to work. Praise Jesus, she had to work because I had no money. But the bottom line is, she called me one day and asked me, or a message came. We didn't have cell phones. She had to, I don't even know how the message got to me. It was a pager or whatever. It got to me, and she had left her key and she couldn't get back into the house. And that was okay. That was day one. This next day, she had to call me again and tell me to run home. So let her in. She had forgot the key again. And at that time, I was a little irritated, annoyed, frustrated. And so I said, "What's wrong with you?" And I was just, I said, "That's too." I said, "I'm trying to do some work over here." And we snapped, and I said, "Watch this." I said, "You're dumb. You're stupid." I just lost it. And what that did, literally, it invalidated her. It broke her, because I went beyond just the act that I felt was stupid, and I called her stupid. And let me tell you what was the result, Doc. The result was I saw the fastest shoe and heel whiz by my head. And she threw a shoe at me, and trust me, I was healed of that disease. All right. But invalidation, we got to make sure that we do not invalidate each other. Make sure, deal with the issue, but do not, push persons moving from the actual incident or the cause to the person that makes them feel devalued. We got to watch that. And so we kind of minimize that.
And another thing we also deal with is just like what we would call negative interpretations, right? Kind of thinking that a person's motives come from a bad place. And when they do something, they're not doing it in the right spirit. So really recognizing and accepting when someone does something, accepting it for what it is. Don't try and read all into it and, oh, he's only doing this because he wants that or whatever. But, just making sure that you allow that person and you accept what they've done for what it is. Again, just not minimizing the motives of what they're doing.
Another questioning.
Yeah, questioning your motives.
Always, this person can't do anything right. And everything is, so that's interpreting everything in a negative way. We try to not do that. And so we kind of minimize that. And that has helped us work through our conflicts. And then the last one we try to minimize is that whole withdrawing and avoidance. Now, I always say it like this: if you see no progress, don't regress, take a recess and have a little talk with Jesus. So I always, when I counsel couples and in my own personal, it's good for you to take a calm interlude, but when you have conflicts that are, just more than just minor, but major conflicts, if you choose to just withdraw and avoid, in other words, you call it what?
I call it the silent protest.
The silent protest. In other words, keeping your feelings inside, and it will just go away. The bottom line, it won't go away. Yeah, take some time, pray, kind of, get yourself together, but the bottom line, don't withdraw and avoid thinking things will go away. And so those are the type of things, Doc, that we have tried, to minimize so that, minimize doing so that we could minimize the risk factors that will, in terms of the divorce. Because I she could leave if she came up one day and say, "Well, I'm leaving," and I'm saying, "Where are we going? Where are we going? What us gonna do?" All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh man, that is awesome. And I think that was some good practical stuff for people who are watching and who are listening to apply to their lives as far as conflict is concerned. We're about halfway through, and so I want to talk to you all specifically about this thing. I want to talk to you all about challenges. And I would love for you all to talk about, I know that as a couple, you all have experienced since for the last maybe 5 or 6 years, some deep-seated grief. And I want you all to talk a little bit, if you're comfortable, with some of the challenges that you've experienced, and then walk individuals through not only what has happened, but also how you all have found working through these things together, what you all have been doing.
Well, when I think about that challenges, one of the biggest challenges truly has been this whole time period in our lives where I kind of call it a parade of death. So in 2014, I lost my mother. And just as a backdrop, my father passed when I was 13 years old. So it was always just my mom. And my mom passed in 2014, and it was devastating for me. It really was. And I mean, we dealt with, within 2 years, my husband losing both of his parents. We are both close, yeah, and within 2 months of one another. Then losing very close friends of ours after that. Then we had the whole transition back to this area, to the Maryland, to the DC metro area. And shortly thereafter, my sister passed, and it just was literally almost overwhelming. And I'd have to say, if it were not for my husband, while we had to go through it together, I thank God that we were together, because maybe some of the days when I was weak, he was a little stronger, and vice versa. But it just was a dark and painful experience. I can't say we're all the way through it. We still have triggers. Something will happen and it triggers that pain, and I might start crying. But that was just a really, really tough time.
Deep, dark time. And imagine that a large part of what we do, as you know, Doc, is to help people journey. When we are, as ministers, called upon to assist families to journey through their grief. So we're ministering, and we're making sure that people are properly prayed for, and their arrangements for their ceremonies. We're giving eulogies, and we're officiating. Imagine when you have this weight and this burden of this unleashed grief and depression and pain of loss, and just boom, 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 one after another. In other words, the rough part of it was that we had to serve while in our own pain. I think Henry Nouwen says we were wounded healers. And people were still extracting, people were still expecting to get a word from the Lord. And every time I had to do a funeral, it was like the scab. And one of the things that we did at Capitol Hill was to have a wonderful Dr. David Defoe to come and to lead our congregation through a grief recovery type of program. And Doc, we just want to thank you. We didn't get to, because of another emergency, get to finish all of that, but that set us on a better path when you led our congregation, the ones who suffered grief, through that. And so I challenge everybody who has gone through grief and is unresolved. I challenge everybody to go to a specialist, a therapist, a psychiatrist, psychologist, somebody who can help you journey through. And like Brenda says, there still are days. I mean, I'll see something, I hear something, I break. And so, but the joy of it is that I have a partner that understands, and we kind of support each other when we have those difficult times.
That's very powerful. And I want to thank you all for sort of sharing that. Help some couple out there that's contemplating marriage, or maybe a couple that has just gotten married, and things aren't going in the fairy tale way that they planned. Help some young couple first, and then give us some advice for couples who are considering to get married or taking the next step.
Let me just say this, and this just came to me. So much so, everybody's on social media And the focus now is on how big your engagement. Oh, we got engaged in Paris. We got engaged in a helicopter ride. We haven't get. In other words, I don't really believe that there are a lot of people, especially young couples, believe that marriage is a covenant and marriage is a lot of hard work. And so focus first on what marriage is, and then let the engagement take care of itself. In other words, prioritize preparing yourself for what God is preparing for you. All right? Because there's going to have to take a level of maturity to navigate through the uncertain waters of marriage. And so, okay, we're having a big engagement party and we're going to do this and all that. And, and then you're ill prepared for what the marriage is all about. So my thing, first of all, I just would say, focus more on yourself, developing a mature perspective of marriage, and let all of the frivolous or the icing, not the cake, but the icing of engagement parties and all that kind of stuff. Make sure that you focus on the main thing. And I think you'll start off with a great foundation. And we have several others. Go ahead, Brenda.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And as a woman, I recognize that when you're thinking about getting married, it's exciting, the dress and your friends and just the event. But it's true, that day, the interesting thing is you do all that planning, you spend all that money, and it goes like that. And so, recognizing that you really have to be in that moment, but understand that your marriage is something that is daily. Every day you choose to be married. You choose your partner each day. And when you're, if you haven't gotten married, don't just rush into it, because this isn't something that should be a do-over. This should be something that you're going to do one time, and you want to do it well. So take your time. Don't be rushed. Don't feel pressure. Oh, I'm such and such age and I got to hurry up and get married, or whatever the reason. Just don't rush.
So basically, don't rush, because you have to have the mindset of commitment. See, these days, and it's always, because even in Christian homes, 1 out of every 2 marriages in divorce. 1 out of every 2. That's a statistic, same as society. But the bottom line is, you have to start. If I could give you some, advice for free, you have to start your marriage with the mindset that, listen, this is one and done. Now, obviously, there are biblical reasons why people do get married, should get married, and if you've gotten even if you've gotten divorced for unbiblical reason, it's not the unpardonable sin or anything like that. So God is gracious. But the bottom line is, if you have not been married, and if you are contemplating marriage, go in with the mindset of, listen, marriage is sacred and divorce is not an option. So the attitude of commitment. Also, and I'll just do this one, is that go in the marriage recognizing that you're going to have to do a whole lot of forgiveness. So understanding that you're not perfect, your spouse is not perfect. So go in with the idea that, listen, I'm going to have to understand this whole forgiveness thing. There are 3 things I would like to just challenge everybody to do, and to as you're contemplating, and even those of you who are married, learn how to say these 3 phrases. And I love you, I'm sorry, and please forgive me. If you do those 3 things, if you keep those in your why? Because you're going to screw up. You're going to say something. You're going to do something. You're going to have a period of time where you're not kind, and you're not thoughtful, and you're not all of that. And you're going to have times that you're going to have to forgive yourself. But if you practice saying, I love you and mean it, I'm sorry and mean it, please forgive me and mean it, I think that is something to establish some great rules for your relationship.
You know, and I would add one other additional thing. Sometimes as Christians, you know, we don't always, if we're talking about people who are contemplating, but also people who are already married, it's okay to get counseling, right? If you're planning on getting married, it's a good idea to get counseling, to have some premarital counseling, and actually not after you've decided to do it. Because you want, if something is revealed, a real red flag, it's an indicator that you probably shouldn't push it forward, right? If you've gotten married and you haven't had counseling and you find yourself having some difficulties, go see someone. Go see a Christian counselor who can help you walk through some things. It is not, you know, it's not some faith thing. You don't have enough faith, or your relationship with God isn't where it should be. God has put people in place and given people tools that can help us to be successful in our marriage, because it's an ever-growing thing. It's this mechanism that's constantly growing. You don't arrive at it. You know, after all these years, we're still growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to seal it with a bow, I know we got to move forward, but make sure that you get on the same page spiritually. Okay? If in fact you're contemplating marriage, I don't care how fine she is, I don't care how handsome he is, how smart, how many digits he has in his check. Before, ladies, listen to me. Before you get him to the altar, make sure you get him to the throne. All right? Women and men, make sure, I don't care how fine she is, brothers, if she doesn't know the Lord, your marriage will never be, ever, what God intends it to be, because it's a divine institution. And so you want to get on the same page spiritually. And that's what it's all about.
Wow, you know, that was some good, powerful stuff. That was great. So, give me sort of an idea. Looking at your marriage, looking at where your marriage started to where you are now. Like, what are some of the differences, the big differences that you see in your marriage now, from where you started to where you are now?
You know, one of the things that I see is the fact that, first of all, we've matured. Right? Again, we were really young, and, you know, things that were such a big deal, you know, and I thought it was such a big thing. It really wasn't, right? And so now when I look at where we are now, I recognize that everything isn't a big thing. Don't take everything so seriously.
Learn to what? Laugh.
Learn to laugh. Sometimes we will do something and look at each other and we'll just crack up, right? We will just start laughing because we'll realize, okay, that was crazy. Why? Okay, so really, you know, and so you learn to laugh. You learn not to take yourself so seriously. You learn to really also just accept some stuff. Some stuff just is. And when you're young, you know, you have this kind of mindset and thinking things are supposed to be this way, that way. And it just doesn't always work that way. And it's okay. It's okay.
Like I was the clean freak.
Oh my God.
No.
I'm gonna say this real quick. So I'm a bit of a neat freak. I am. And
OCD.
I'm OCD. I know my issue. And when we first got married, I remember one time, I'll tell you a funny, quick little story. My husband had this thing. He could be messy, right? So he would come home, take off his suit, and just kind of throw it on the chair. And I just get so annoyed with that. And I would hang it up. And so I decided I was going on strike. And my strike was going to be, I am not hanging up anything he puts on that chair, and because he's going to hang that mess up. I'm not doing it. I kid you not. Day 1, day 2, Day 3. By day 5, I was crazed. I mean, crazed. He could care less about that stuff on that chair. And I had to say, okay, so I am torturing myself because this man could care less about this. This strike is only impacting me. But I say that to say, and needless to say, I did hang up all the stuff, but I can say this. He has gotten so much better, right? He makes up the bed in the morning. You know, you can find him washing some dishes. And I have had to be more flexible, right? To recognize, Brenda, if everything isn't perfect, it's okay, because I've had to learn how to live in the moment and not be so concerned about the external things like that, but to just be able to just kind of relax and have fun. And so those are some shifts that have happened for us over the years. And you might think, well, you know, that's kind of corny, but I'm serious. Really, it could really get crazy. You know, those types of issues can become such a big thing in a marriage.
Yeah. In other words, don't sweat the small stuff.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
And we've learned that over the years, and God is good. God is good. And she's been patient, and I've gotten a whole lot better. All right.
And I don't think that that's unique. Like, there's many of us that go on strike in our mind, but the other person we have no idea that we're on strike. You know, they're sitting wondering around, what's wrong with you? And we're striking on something that the other person may be completely oblivious to. And so that's where the communication comes in. If something is bothering me, stop letting it just bother only me. Bring someone else into your anger. Talk to the other person about it so that you're not carrying it by yourself. Because I'll just be like, maybe something's wrong with it. I'll just go about my business. And if you're on strike without telling me you're on strike, put up a sign or something to let me know you're on strike.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm glad I'm not the only one. That's nice.
No, join the club, Chief.
I got you. Well, listen, I want to thank you all for that. We're going to break for a real short commercial. If you're watching and you have any questions, we do have a few questions in the chat already. If you have any questions, please make sure you type them really fast into the comment box. We're almost out of time. So we'll be right back with Dr. and Sister Peeler.
The Relationship Ministries Department of the Allegheny East Conference is a family of ministries that seeks to engage, enrich, and empower families, men, singles, couples, and parents to have healthy and whole relationships. To access the many resources we have available to you, your church, or your family, visit us on the web at www.visitaec.org/relationshipmin.
All right, we're going to take just a few questions. We have one that came in online earlier. This is from Ms. Margaret. Can you talk about how you speak each other's love language in your marriage? I'm sorry, Sister Henley now. Yes. Can you talk about how you speak your other's love language in your marriage?
Yeah. Language is acts of service. And so for him, I know that about him. And so there's one thing I know he just loves. If I give him a good foot rub, if I give him a good massage, I have positioned myself in a really good place.
Yeah. So, and Brenda's love language is quality time and words of affirmation. And so we try to do our best to put that in mind as we navigate our schedules. Brenda, she's a communicator. She loves to talk, but and to successfully dialogue. but time with her. So and she's not overly demanding of time, but the time that we do reserve, she is protective over. And so we try to make sure. And then the words of affirmation, I believe that they're good. And we try to express, who she is and how I feel about her, and some of the great qualities that I remember this story of a man who he was just sitting there looking at his wife, and his wife said, "Honey, I'm looking at this full-length mirror, and I'm getting so old. And I need you to tell me something so positive about me, because I'm looking at my arms and they're getting flabby. I'm looking at my skin. It's so dry. It's not like it used to. It's not elastic. I'm looking at my whole shape, and it's all out of." And she was just going on and on. And she said, "Honey, can you say anything that could make me feel better?" And he pauses and says, "Yes, honey. It doesn't seem like you've lost your eyesight." So in his determined, and I'm sure he slept on the couch for weeks, and divorce papers was in there. In other words, being a very expressive, building, because when you build people, you build the kingdom. That's my motto. And when you build with the words, lift up in your marriage, you can go a long way. And so her is one of I would say, first quality time, and then secondly is words of affirmation.
Here's another one that came to me. Someone texted me this. I don't think they had the courage to talk about it. But if forgiveness is hard, how do we start?
Well, basically, we start by recognizing that true forgiveness only comes from God. Okay? A lot of times we see when Jesus was hanging on the cross, he even said, "Father, forgive them." Because at that point, in his humanness and in his pain, he did not have the capacity, because he became sin. And so he said, "Father, forgive them." Sometimes you have to, first of all, understand that forgiveness only comes from a divine source. Number two, recognize that your husband has not, or your wife has not done, your spouse has not done to you anything worse than you have already done to God. Okay? You got to recognize that. Number three, all right, this whole thing about forgiveness is real deep. If in fact you choose not to forgive, and we're talking about how to, start this process of forgiveness, you got to understand and recognize these concepts, is that, and this is very, very, very serious, that if you choose not to forgive, what you are doing is jeopardizing your own forgiveness. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. All right. And the Bible says in Matthew that if you refuse to forgive others, you are literally blocking your path to your own forgiveness. And so you could start, and forgiveness is not easy. It's not just but it's divine. But when you release and give over to God whatever has been done against you, you will free yourself to breathe again and to live for the next moment, because you're passing over your pain to God.
All right. Well, listen, I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for coming on. Think about, do you all have any resource that you all think has been helpful to you all that you may want to share with someone else that may be listening? Just give them an idea. If you have any resources like books or tools or anything else like that.
a cadre of books and resources on marriage and relationships, and different ones have provided me tools to navigate personally and to instruct others. But one of the classics is by Bill Hybels' book, and that book is more not more than a match. That's another book. But the book by Bill, I could give you all of those resources. Matter of fact, let me just retool. I could send them all to you, my 5 favorite, and then you could just pass it on. But always make sure that you read, and just expose yourself to not only resources when it comes down to books, but make sure that you find yourself a couple that you can model. Now, let me just say this. We talk, and this is 35 years, it's going to be 36 years, but our marriage is a good marriage, but it's not a perfect marriage. Strive for good, solid, okay? Because it's never going to be perfect because we're not perfect. It is a growing thing, but you put those things in mind so that you can have a peace that passes all understanding, helping other people to grow. So my job is to line up my life behind her, okay? And push her up so that she can be her best self. That's my job. Her job is to line up behind me, push me up so that I can be all what God has created me to be. So it's a mutual type of submission that says, I get behind you and I push you up. And you get behind me and you push me up. And if everybody is doing the pushing, God gets the glory.
Gotcha. I had one last question that came in that I thought was a good one, right? And I'm going to put you on the spot and throw this one out to you, right? Just help Chris real quick. What does Dayton look like for your relationship after all? And I'm seeing her type this after all this time, after 35 years. What does dating look like now after 35 years for you?
Dating for us, it looks like going on a nice walk. It looks like, catching a movie together, going for a meal. We love, again, as he stated, we love music, going to a concert, various genres of music. And so we just continue to do those things. Actually, some of the things that we did in our younger days, we still do now, and we enjoy it. That's a regular date for us. It doesn't have to be something that's so grandiose. While we do make sure we have those times, but a regular date is really just that time where I know I have his full attention. We're not looking at phones, we're not texting and doing all of that, but we are totally engaged. That's a great date.
Awesome. All right. I want to thank you all. Just real quick before we take closing comments from Dr. Pilla and Sister Pilla, I just want to let you all know that this upcoming Saturday at 4:00, we're having a conversation for our singles. Nick Talaferro will be with us. Pastor Kim Bolgen, Leo Smart, and Dr. Tiffany Llewellyn will be having this open conversation for singles. And so if you're single, or you know someone single, or even if you're married and you want to be involved in a single conversation, whatever it is, we just want to invite you at 4:00 on this Saturday at June 13th, 4:00 for this conversation with our singles. Unfortunately, you all are our last one where we have to take a break for the summer with camp meeting and stuff coming up. And so we're not back to a Sunday conversation until the second week of July. But I want to thank you all for coming on, and then just give us in 30 seconds some parting words for people who may be online, who may need some encouragement. What do you want people to walk away from this conversation with?
For me, I'd want to say that, first of all, again, thank you for having us. Walk away from this conversation recognizing that love is a decision. And it's a decision that you make every single day. You decide every day to love your spouse. You decide every day to be committed. You decide every day to give them your best self. And so just remember that in your relationship, that you make a decision for that relationship to be what it needs to be each and every day, and that you allow God to be your center and your anchor to hold you together as you walk that journey.
And I would just ditto that and just say that there's nothing that cannot be overcome if in fact you submit your lives to God and recognize that God does have the power to turn situations around. Do not capitulate to the noise, the demonic noise that says that you cannot get through this. There will be tough times. There will be stuff that goes on. There will be bad choices. There'll be decisions. There'll be rough seasons. But say to yourself, with God, you can get through this.
I want to thank you all. I want to thank our audience. Dr. Peeler, Sister Pilla, this was very rich discussion, great wisdom. Hopefully our audience got something from this. We want to thank you for coming and have a wonderful and blessed day.
Thank you so much.